Well, welcome to the fourth in a series of 5 library lecture series. This is sponsored by the Smith County Master Gardeners Association. No, I'll talk right into the microphone. You can do anything you want. My name is Dale Wade, and I am co-leader with Becky Wade of the Education Programs Committee, as most of you know. Today's lecture, No-Till Garden for Small Spaces, is presented by our own Katy, Barone. Katy began gardening in the limestone region of San Antonio. She moved to Gardening Heaven, also known as East Texas, where just about everything grows. She became a certified master gardener, graduating with class 24 in 2018. She currently serves as project leader for the Shade Garden of the Tyler Botanical Gardens and for the Youth Gardens. I give to you someone whose motto is, gardening is landscape painting, and grass is just a flower bed in waiting.
Is this good? Can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so thank you for that introduction. I'm here today to talk to you about no-till gardening. I'm new at it. I'm a novice, still learning, but I've had some success in my front garden, gardening, so that's what I'm going to bring you today. So it's going to be just a loose format. You can ask questions as they come up or offer information as I go through the presentation. So we're going to get started with no-till gardening. All right, so spring's in the air. All the box stores and nurseries are full of plants. We've all got the bug. And everybody sort of feels intoxicated by the freshness of the season, coming home with an armful of plants, I can tell you from experience. And we all know the joy that a new project can bring. So maybe you've been growing your little plants over the winter, or looking through seed catalogs, or drawing up plans, thinking about maybe a community garden, or growing some produce. Maybe you're going to do an pre-intention or meditation garden. Or maybe you're going to share your love of gardening with the future generations, maybe your grandkids or a youth garden. Or maybe you've got in mind a pollinator garden or a monarch station. Or maybe you just want to grow something. But we all know that gardening takes work. I mean, we all know that. Preparation can be time and labor intensive. Having to remove the sod, hoe the weeds, turn and till, double dig again. It can be daunting. Oh, hold on, I'll go backwards. Okay. So in just doing some research, the top 3 reasons people don't garden is the time, the cost, and then labor, maintenance, and upkeep. And we can all vouch for that. Oh, hold on. The other backwards. Okay. So while your intent might be a quiet garden retreat or a lush vegetable garden, it can often feel like this. Or this. I might have been there. But there's good news. You can create a successful garden with reduced time and labor and without breaking your back, which is a no-till garden. So we're going to talk today about what no-till garden is, why you might want to think about one, how to create one, and some ways that maybe you can ensure its success, applications for the no-till, and then some other kinds of no-till gardens that you may or may not heard of. Okay, so basically this is just a kind of a loose definition, but a no-till garden is a time-saving method that takes the heavy labor out of traditional gardening, which is what was most attractive to me, while still promoting soil health, water conservation, and sustainability. It's very well established practice, been around for a very long time. It's kind of rooted in permaculture, just meaning organic methods. And it's hallmarked by 3 things: layering of organic matter, heavy mulching, repeated mulching, and then no turning over of the soil, which is the most attractive part to me. So we really can't talk about no-till gardening without talking about this character, this lady. Her name was Ruth Stout, and she was Kansas-born, a Quaker family in the 1800s. And she was quite the character and quite the eccentric. So she's known for sort of her eccentric nature. When she was 16, she palled around with Carrie Nation. They were busting up saloons during the temperance movement. She never got arrested. She has a penchant for lively debate, and she was known to have gardened naked, which seems a little risky. But overall, she is credited with rediscovering the natural processes of soil development and an early form of the no-till sheet composting method. She has these monikers, the Mulch Queen and the No-Till Duchess, which is awesome. So she was not traditional. She didn't want to hurry up and get married like the rest of her friends. So she had a lot of jobs. She was a governess. She worked in retail. She was an assistant to a fake mind reader. She did many things, like you do. And then at the age of 45, she met this mild-mannered psychiatrist. She fell in love. And they got married, and they bought a 55-acre farm in Connecticut. That apparently was a very beautiful place. And it was there that she started her first garden. So both of them had grown up on farms, and so they were experienced with raising animals, composting, growing things, and being good stewards of the land. And I love this picture of them with their Katy. This thing. They were married a long time. So Ruth was a friend to nature, and she was given to these long, quiet walks in the woods that were near her home. And she was observant, she was smart, very intelligent lady, and she observed that seedlings and saplings and other things, the fern and the trillium, all of that, were just growing happily out of the forest floor and the leaf litter. And it really got her to thinking, so she started reading about permaculture, organic methods, and so on. And she realized that this wooden floor was really like the composting, and it kept the forest alive in perpetuity without any work. It did it naturally. And she called it many layers of mulch. She loved mulch. And so she started to form some ideas in her head. She began to make connections and think about the possibility of replicating this in her own garden. She's starting. So every spring, Ruth and her husband hired this man to come and do the plowing, of the garden. Well, he was always late, and he had some excuse, one thing or another. Well, in 1945, he was late for the last time. She wasn't going to wait on her garden, so she decided to kind of replicate this idea that was kind of germinating in her mind. So she collected all her homemade compost, the manure, the kitchen scraps, and then she just piled them on her untilled garden. And then she added up all this hay. She had lots of hay, so she piled it up, and she just direct seeded her garden in that big old pile. And it grew to be the most beautiful garden she ever had. So over the coming years, she never removed the hay. It was called the rotting hay technique. Her brother, who was a highfalutin author, he wrote Thomas Wolfe mystery series, which they're out of print now. But he was real famous and snobby. He had people that did the work for him in his garden, and he called her garden the garbage dump. Sounds like a brother. But over the coming years, she never removed the hay. She just kept piling it on, and then eventually she had no more need for composting because she was just composting in place. And she never tilled again, and thus the sheet composting and no-till idea was born, really reborn. So the basic tenets of her method was seasonal addition of compost, year-round mulching, no tilling or overturning of the soil. Her idea was that the piled-up mulch was the keystone. She loved mulch. So this is a quote from her, which I love. The unmulched garden looks like some naked thing, which for one reason or another would look better with clothes on. Wouldn't we all? So she went on to write more than a dozen books in her lifetime, many articles for Organic Gardening magazine. She was a friend of Rodell for sure. Mother Earth News. She was on radio and talk shows sharing her method and practical wisdom of garden knowledge. And she lived to be 90. So, a wonderful lady. So the no-till method still exists, but it's changed, over time. but the basic elements remain. So we're going to look at the method, the science behind it, and maybe how you'd like, if you'd like to start your own one. So this no-till method is called sheet composting, which you may have heard of. It's also called sheet mulching, and it's also called the lasagna garden. You may be familiar with that as well. So it consists of layering organic matter, high carbon, high nitrogen, to create a composted soil in place for direct planting. So the materials are arranged in broad, flat layers. It's not, in a bin or piled up, versus a traditional mounting. And this self-composting garden is considered to be a form of cold composting because you're not having to turn it or work it over anything. It requires no tilling or overturning. So there are so many benefits. And the more I started reading about this, the more it just takes you into oblivion of the benefits of this kind of gardening. Of course, first of all, it saves time and labor. The in-place composting promotes soil health through production of nutrients, which seems intuitive. The organic base attracts and supports all those great beneficial organisms that are essential to soil health. The thick mulching helps to maintain soil moisture, controls the temperature, and deters weeds. And it's a water-wise method, which is what I can attest to this. It reduces the amount of watering that is needed to sustain the garden. So, this is very attractive method. It's less work, not a lot of water usage. So it's very sustainable method. Also, the minimal disturbance to the soil by gardening in place protects all those naturally occurring organisms. And the nerd in me was very interested in all of this. So fascinating. Tilling the soil actually destroys the intricate ecosystems, and they are extensive. I just had no idea. So this kind of method promotes the presence of earthworms, which you can imagine, so that they come up looking for organic material, and so when they're doing so, it makes all these channels through the soil, which aerates the soil, allows for nutrient exchange, gas exchange, and also permeation of the water. And then the last one, which is the most fascinating to me, is that it maintains the integrity of these mycorrhizal fungi, who knew, and they are beneficial fungi that naturally occur, and they form this symbiotic relationship with all the plants in the soil, in your garden, in your yard. And it's amazing to me. They form like a neural network. So they attach to the roots of your plant, and they produce these filaments, and some of the filaments actually adhere to the root, and then they go inside the root. They make these little fruity bodies, and they're like little neural nodes, and they allow the transfer of nutrients and water back and forth from the plant to the fungus, from the fungus to the plant. But meanwhile, back at the ranch, underneath, they have these filaments that run the whole length of the garden. They go for miles and miles. And what they do is they are breaking down the organic matter, converting it into nutrients that the plant can use. Well, at the same time, they make available more water from the soil through that breakdown to the chemical reaction. And so it actually allows plants to withstand water stress. So the presence of those fungi will actually help during times of drought and dryness, it will actually help the plant survive. I had no idea. So if you have any interest, just look it up. It's really amazing. So tilling would destroys that web. And not to say that it can't be reformed, but this beautiful matrix that's in place is actually disturbed. All right, so this is just something I got off the internet, but I thought it was a really good depiction of what we were just talking about. So I don't have a pointer, but this, you can see in that first tropic and second tropic level, that's where all of that happens. So you've got all these nutrients, in the soil. Hopefully you have this organic matter. These, you've got the beneficial fungi and bacteria and the nematodes in there doing their thing, creating this wonderful nutrient-rich base for your plants. Meanwhile, they also are the basis for all the way up the food chain. It's just fascinating to me. So you can take the food chain all the way back to the soil level. Very cool. All right, so let's get started. Let's talk about how you put one together. So just say, like any good gardener, you've got to plan, hopefully. So that's ideally. So you need to determine the intent of your garden, or site selection, location is crucial, and then of course all the materials and the plants that you're thinking about growing. All right, so your garden intent, so that's just your purpose. You know, maybe very simple, like you just want to grow vegetables or you want to grow pretty flowers. Maybe it's a pollinator garden, shade garden. Maybe you want something special like a meditation or intent garden. Maybe you want a community garden or communal shared garden. Whatever you're thinking about doing, what your purpose is, it's really important to have that in your mind first, because that will determine where you plant your plants. All right, so once you've figured out what you want to do, and then you're going to choose your site. And these are kind of the basic rules. A lot of us are master gardeners, but not everybody knows the basic rules. If you're going to plant vegetables or flowers, 6 to 8 hours, you have to have that for fruiting and flowering. You need to look at the distance that your garden will be from trees and shrubs that might shade. And you have to think about deciduous shade. So if you have a tree that loses its leaves in the winter, your garden might be in full sun during that time, and in the summer it might be shaded. So you have to kind of think about that. And then you also have to think about time of day and the way shrubs and trees might cast shadows. And buildings too, I didn't put that there, but you really should think about buildings that might be casting shadow in place. Just look at the proximity to sidewalks, driveways, and foot traffic, anything that might interfere with your garden. Obviously, you want to be near a water source if you can, even for a garden hose or if you're going to do a drip system. Ease of access for you, especially if it's going to be a cutting garden or a veggie or a herb garden. And then drainage. All the reading I did said to avoid places where there's standing water. You just don't, it just means it's trouble. So just stay away from any place like that. So just find a place where you know that it's given you drain. But one thing I want to say here, you can grow these kind of gardens on a compact soil. So let's say you have an area where lots of cars or tractors or something work. And compact the soil. You could actually put this kind of garden there, but it will loosen the soil and do all the, it will amend the soil and so forth. It just may take longer for that process to happen. Avoid slopes unless you're doing, a formal tiered garden. You can do it that way. Otherwise, you'll have erosion. And then just decide if you want it. All right, so just one small tidbit about this. Some people are very exact and they have to measure everything. So, I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm not one of those people. But you can. So you can use the method like the gentleman has here. He's got it all roped off and he's got his nice pegs. But you can just step it off. You can use, I use a garden hose to make my shape. But you can do it any way you want. But you just sort of want to know about how long and wide it's going to be, what the shape is. So you sort of need to do a little plan that way. The reading I did said if you're going to start a garden like this, a good size test garden is a 4x8. That's not hard and fast rule, but that's easy to maintain, and if it's a complete failure, then you haven't lost much. So just consider access. I like this picture a lot where it shows these are nice neat rows, but they have hay in between all the rows, so it's easy to get to and from. It's easy to access. You can use, in that case, you can use gravel, you can use mulch, you can use anything for that. All right, so here's what you're going to need for this kind of garden. Newspaper, a bucket or tub, just a big one. You're going to be wetting all this newspaper. Garden hosing sprayer, hard rakes, peat moss, carbon-rich, nitrogen-rich ingredients, compost or composted soil, and mulch. You notice I didn't put cardboard on here. There are 2 camps about cardboard, apparently. I did not know this. I used cardboard for my garden. It worked fantastic. It was very easy, and it decomposed in no time. What they say about cardboard is that it just takes longer to decompose, and it's a little bit harder for water to penetrate. And it's not to say you can't use it, but it just takes a little bit longer to break down. All right, so just a review of what green and brown or nitrogen-rich and carbon-rich are. So you've got vegetable scraps, animal manure, grass clippings, coffee grounds, tea bags, raw compost. That's sort of the heat for the composting process. And then the brown or the carbon-rich are just all of your browns are leaves, straw, wood ashes, wood chips, sawdust, peat moss, mature compost, newspaper, cardboard, those kinds of things. And so in this case, what you'll do is you'll be layering, using those materials to layer, just like you would in a compost pile. So this is how you get started. So you've got your area, and what you're going to do is just mow the grass or weed, just scalp it all the way to the ground. And you can also do it on bare soil too. But let's say, like mine was a big area of grass, and I just had the guys scalp it all the way to the ground. And then you just wet newspaper, a lot of newspaper. Thanks to Chris Cochran, she's not here today, but she's a recycler. I had more newspaper than I knew what to do with, but it was fantastic because you're going to need about 4 or more layers of newspaper. So you wet the newspaper, you lay it down, and then and you want it adhering on all sides, just covered as best you can, and then you're going to just spray it down with a garden hose. And so the surface tension of the water will make it adhere to the grass, and it'll make it lay down nicely. All right, so that's when you start layering. So it just depends on what you have, and I'm going to show you the one I did, but you just use what you have. I ended up having to purchase materials because I don't have a big compost pile or anything like that. So it can either, could be, like if you have animals, you can use manure, you could use compost, whatever you have. And you just start layering, and like this is an example, so you just start with the old lawn, and they have cardboard here, and then just start laying them on. Doesn't matter what order, you just start piling them on. But remember, they're in long, broad sheets, and they're about 2 inches each thick. And then you cover with, they recommend you cover with 2 inches of compost, and I use composted soil, and that way I can go right in, I can plant right into the compost. And then you cover it with mulch. Yes?
If you have a compost pile and you just have leaves on the top that aren't really rotted down yet, can you use those?
Yeah, you sure can. Actually, you could, even if your compost isn't mature, you can still take it out and just, you can put it out there and use it as compost or as a layer. All right, so this is, it's not a great picture, but it's just another diagram. This one shows on top of the soil, hardwood leaves, compost, so on, all the way up to the top. So that's just what it looks like from a cross section. So after you've got it all completed, you have a choice. You can either plant or not plant. So if you choose not to plant, then you just leave it alone. You can wet it if you want to, but really the natural processes of the weather will, all of those materials will decompose over time, and in about 6 to 8 months, you should have some nice soil for the next season. But if you want to, you can go ahead and plant right away, which I didn't believe I could do, but you can. And so you can direct sow seeds, or you can do bedding plants. They recommend close planting, very close planting, and repeated mulching, which I do. Like for my garden, I mulch in the spring, and then I mulch again in the fall. And then in between seasons, like in July, I mulch again, and then midwinter, I mulch again, just to keep it covered, keep the soil temperature satisfactory. One thing about timing, most of the literature recommends that you do this kind of garden in the fall. You do not have to. But what's nice about the fall is that it allows immediate planting of the mild season garden, like your fall garden, and also annuals and perennials, but also permitting the time needed for the next growing season in the spring. And so that's what I did. I did mine in September.
Katy,
Yes.
we were talking about straw, you use pine straw.
Yes, that's what I use. I use pine straw. And it hasn't, I did read about acidity and all that, but so far, it hasn't been a problem at all. And it looks, my bed's on the curb, so I wanted it to look nice, and so it's so much prettier and softer, and easy to manage. Like when I plant seeds, it's easy to pull away. And straw, you can do straw, you can use that too, or hay if you wanted to.
Katy,
Yes.
if you're doing a garden that's at the sidewalk in the street, do you notice like a heat differential? Because, I've read like they call those hell strip gardens.
Yeah, I have a hell strip garden, right. So I'll tell you, the only place I've had trouble is my neighbors. So my neighbors asked me to just extend my garden to their driveway. Okay, as long as I plant potatoes, that's what they said. So So I did. Anyway, well, I was going to tell you, we call it the hillbilly garden, but that's a whole other story. But anyway, that right there where it's low, I just can't keep I keep it mulched, but there's some erosion there because it's a little slope. So that's the only place I have where it's dry and I get Bermuda in. Just that little section right there. But I haven't had any other weeds. But Bermuda, I think was there when I, put everything down. So that's my little trouble spot right there. But otherwise, I haven't had any trouble. And it stays so moist. I'm just so surprised. And like, I stick my hand down there, it's nice. Anyway, it just, you don't think it's going to work. I mean, I really didn't think it was going to work, and it did. So when, I don't think anything will grow, and it does. So when direct sowing, of course, you're going to pull back the mulch, and then you're going to, let it warm up. You're going to pull back the mulch, plant your seeds, water them in, and just leave the mulch aside, because you need the sunshine, and you need the warmth, from the sun. You need the temperature to raise for them to germinate. And then once they get to about 3 or 4 inches tall, you can just dump the mulch up by them. Yeah, so they grow about 3 inches, 4 inches like that, and then you can I grew turnips and beets that way. So, okay, so this is my garden. It's on the curve. This was summer of 2020. So this is how I started. So here's my health strip. And what happened is it was the pandemic. I had a lot of time in my hands. And Tommy Green gave me this book, this Lasagna Gardening, which is, been around for eons. It was so great. I love it. It's very easy. Thank you, Tommy. I think I want it back. But it was great. This gal's an old-time gardener. She grew up with gardeners. She has a great story about her grandma eating. But anyway, I started thinking, what can I do? And I don't have enough sun in the backyard to do a garden. So I got to thinking about the hill strip. I thought, man, that's kind of risky to put it on the curb. But I just decided to do it. And so one Saturday, I went to Lowe's and got my stuff, and I did it. So more newspaper from Chris Cochran. So I had about 4 or 5 layers of newspaper. You don't use the glossy flyers. I guess you already know that, but just the regular newsprint. And then wetted it down very well. And then I put my layer of peat moss. And peat moss is not expensive. And then this here, you could actually see, this is really the second part of my garden. You can see where my original garden was. But anyway, so this shows the 2 layers. So this is peat moss here, and this is nice where we had composted soil there a lot. And so I did newspaper, peat moss, composted soil. Then I did peat moss, composted soil. So it was about 8 to 10 inches tall with the curve and grass. So it was big. And then after I finished that,
So Katie, it was 8 to 10 inches above the curb? How do you keep it from
I know, so
washing off the curb?
Okay, so here's thinking. So anyway, I wet it. Oh, wow. There we go, okay. So that's what it looked like. I put my straw, my pine straw up there. And I just let it rest for a week. And then the next week, this is September 12th, so the next week I planted. So I just did some greens, which are easy, so it was kind of not so risky. So I did collards, kale, cabbage, I had some bunching onions from the student garden I had, and then I transplanted some perennials from the backyard to the front. And then and zucchini. Zucchini were huge. They were huge. I got those black giant. So yeah, so that's this one here. Yeah. So these, I can't point to it. These are those big things. Those are the zucchini. They were just like insanity. And then, but anyway, so this was Halloween. Okay, this was the 20th of October. So from September 19th to October. That's what I did. I planted into the grass, y'all. I dug and I had to go down to the grass. I stuck my plants in. So it was just,
And Katy, that didn't wash.
no, I will tell
With
you.
rain or anything, it looks quite high.
Yeah, it is. So I don't have any trouble with the soil washing, but the pine straw does. So I'm not gonna lie, so early in the morning, I get up and I chuck, I make it nice and neat on both sides. I push it, I'm obsessive. So I push it along the sides so it looks neat and tidy. I like a tidy garden. But I haven't had any trouble with the soil.
So you don't have to have any kind of
Edging,
edging
no.
or anything on it.
Not at all, because I did consider that, I could do that, but I haven't. But I haven't had trouble with it so far. And then, so this, over here was in the, okay, so after Snowmageddon, the garden survived Snowmageddon, I put sheets over it, and it survived. So that next week was like lawn or spring, and so I planted, you can see on this part, and those are potatoes on this, right here, those are potatoes, and some baby squash here, and then you can see, those, but I went ahead and planted, some flowers, I had some pansies and some snaps in there. So anyway, and then on the other end I had turnips, and I grew turnips. It was fun. And ate the greens. It was a really, I never had been able to grow my own veggie garden, so this is my first time. And then the next picture was just the summer. I didn't grow vegetables that summer, I just grew flowers, and so that's what it looked like in the summer. But I have to say, it was it had been a wet spring and a mild summer, so I can't really take credit for all of it. Mother Nature did a lot. I didn't have to water at all, zero, until August, and then I did some hand watering. So this was just kind of a fluke that I started this on this very mild, year. But then the next year, this last year, my goodness, it was so hot, but this garden did really well until July. And so I had to pull some things out, but I only had to water once a week. And I have irrigation in there, I have a sprinkler system, but I don't ever turn it on. I just hand water. And then this is it, this is about a few weeks ago, so it's just waking up. But, so I've added some bulbs in there, and I've got fennel. I had my first larva of black swallowtail with a funnel of, it was very fun to watch on 3 larvae in here. I'm not just the caterpillars, I'm talking about the chrysalis. I should have said chrysalis. Anyway, so it's still alive is what I'm trying to tell you. It's not dead, it's still alive.
Just as an aside, fennel is a host plant.
Yes, I know, that's why I planted them. So I have bronze fennel, which is where they are, and then I just planted over here, you can see the regular green fennel growing. So anyway, yeah, it is very excited. Okay, so then I just want to show you these. This is from the internet, but it's nice to have inspiration. So aren't these gorgeous? So on the far left, this is like what I'm describing for. This is a mix of flowers and veggies, so pretty. And then here's a tiered garden, which they made, which is so beautiful. And then of course it's lovely traditional, and then look at this cottage garden. And these are all no-till. So it just tells you what the possibilities are. Very inspiring. If you go on the internet and look up no-till garden images, you'll go crazy. So some applications, you can do these anywhere. You can do any kind of garden. I think it would be great for a community garden. Use a school garden. It would be a great teaching tool. Gardens for differently able or those with health challenges. I think it would be wonderful since there's less work involved. Gardeners for old adults like myself. And senior living communities. Really, I didn't have to do any digging. My garden I put together, I'm not buying in an hour. It took me an hour. It was easy. And then just repurpose, like if you have a utility or abandoned areas, I think it'd be a great way to beautify that. And then of course just smaller ones. So this is not the only kind of no-till. There's several others that you might be interested in. I thought they were mentioning here. That was a bad joke. You can garden. You can grow potatoes in trash cans. Yeah. raised beds, now there's so many opportunities and options to raise beds. When I was first starting, it was like railroad ties. That's what everybody remember that. And but now you can buy this beautiful, handicap accessible, gorgeous metal. Anyway, there's so many opportunities. So raised bed gardening, and you can use this method in a raised bed, no problem. And then the keyhole garden, we have an expert in keyhole gardens right here. And it's a wonderful method. It's interesting to read about. They were started in Africa, and the whole idea was to provide accessible, healthy food to the elderly and disabled in Africa. And so these missionaries developed the method, and they taught the kids at school, and the kids taught their parents and grandparents. It was so awesome. But it just involves this same method, same kind of layering ground. It's just the composting in place. And then it's just kind of a packed semicircle with a cutout in the middle with a self-composting basket. It goes all the way through the middle. And you put your kitchen scraps in there, and then they decompose and they feed the garden. And it's also arm reach, so there's no bending, and you can just garden, at arm level. And then the hay bale, which I've never done, but I'd love to try. Somebody gave me this book, The Straw Bale Garden, so you're welcome to come look at it if you want to. I think it'd be great to do with children. But you just have a hay bale and soil on top, sow your seeds or plant them there, and they grow. Wouldn't that be fun? And you can grow flowers as well. And then the last one is one I don't know a lot about, but it's called culture. And I think we have an intern in our new class, right? I think he's like, yes, I don't remember his name, but he is, yeah, I do as well. Anyway, but I did some reading on it, and it's a method where you use like brush, just tree brush and logs and so forth, and then you start adding, the compost, your manure, and your leaves, and all your grass clippings, and you just pile this up. And then, and what I read is that they recommend you do like a cover crop, like a rye or a clover or something like that, which creates kind of a matrix or substrate, and then you can start planting your plants in it. But I don't know, it seems crazy. But there is in the references I'm going to show you, there's an article by Dr. Masafi in there that you might want to read. It's a really good article about it. So, and I have an article about keyhole gardening and the reference for this straw bale. Okay, so one last word. We have to mention that no dig doesn't mean no work. Okay, because you have to, tend a garden. But the no-till garden still needs, even though it needs proper tending, you'll have less weeding, less watering, less hollering. I love this cartoon. It's so cute. How are you arranging your plants by color? Alphabetical. Those precise people. Does any questions that anybody has about anything? Yes.
I've been wondering how to put my kitchen scraps, outside in compost, because I'm worried it'll draw rats.
Yeah, I used to have a compost pile. I didn't have any trouble, but I don't know. Anybody else can speak to that?
I've never had anybody touch my kitchen scraps when I was out in the country, not even the raccoons or anything like that.
Oh,
I just threw them in on the top.
yeah, Elizabeth.
I actually do have mice and snakes in my compost. However, my compost is relatively near my chicken house too. So the secret, I think, is that with my good kitchen scraps, I actually compost them in a barrel until they kind of liquefy, and then I put it on the regular heap. And I find I have less trouble that way.
Probably still going to have snakes. They're everywhere. I can use snakes everywhere. So, yeah.
Don't bother them.
No. Oh, yes, sorry. How do you know if you purchase hay? Are you sure that it hasn't been Yes, I don't know that question. I know you're supposed to get the Gulf Coast hay, right? Isn't that the good hay? Does anybody know? Maybe have any? Greg's not here to tell us. We'll find that out.
A lot of times that feed store over by the Cotton Belt building has it,
South side.
south side.
Oh, yeah, I love them. So that's reliable hay, would that be what you say?
What about to season hay or straw?
Now, make sure the hay is sterilized, otherwise you'll have a really nice garden done with grass.
Well, so how do you know, so I'm just gonna ask, how do you know it's just? Okay, hopefully they're gonna know. Yeah, I don't know, that's a good question.
If you know someone who cuts their own hay and there are people who specifically cut hay before it produces a lot of seed heads. And so if you know who's cutting your hay, you can ask them where they got it and whether or not it had a lot of seed heads in it. But that would probably be the only way to know. I do know in Texas right now, we can't import hay from many other states, maybe no other states, because of certain insects that are in other hays. And so I think most of the hay we can get in Texas right now is Texas grown hay. So probably your hay seller is going to know something about where the hay came from.
Pretty good answer. Okay, thank you for that. All right, so I just thought I'd end with some words from Ruth. Would have loved, I said that. So this one, I love spring anywhere, but if I could choose, I would always greet it in a garden. Okay? Working in the garden gives me something beyond the enjoyment of the senses. It gives me a profound feeling of inner peace. I can attest to that. And this last one's my favorite because I can identify. I hate to wear garden gloves. So if you have a soul in the garden, not for anything, you can work with gloves on. Fingernails. Okay, so here's my list of references. And if you, I have some run off here. I think Amanda ran off about 30. If you like a paper copy, I have some here. Otherwise, you can